Nick, I got some reading material for you today.
Excellent.
We're going to cover Sin City today.
Yeah.
We got the whole set here.
He does.
All of them right there. We're going to cover the movie that covers the first book, not the second one, the third book.
Yep.
The fourth book, and bits and pieces of, what is it, book number 6.
Yeah.
So we're covering a bunch of Sin City today, a whole trough of it. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. And welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoetheFilmReviews.com.
Hey, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. Hey, we're on Twitter and Instagram. Reach us that way. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals and some little things you can find out about our other reviews that we do as well. Today we're going to talk about, we talked about film noirs. This is film noir on acid, I say.
Yeah.
It's Sin City.
Yeah, so walk down the right back alley in Sin City and you can find anything. Marv, an unstable brute, finds a new love in Goldie, only to have to hunt down her killer. Dwight, a killer with a new face, finds himself trying to preserve a shaky truce between the prostitute and the police. And Hartigan, a retired cop framed for rape, finds himself protecting a stripper from her would-be killer. It's all just another day for the residents of Basin City.
Okay, in order for Robert Rodriguez to do this film, he had to give up his director's union card because he wanted to make sure it said Frank Miller's Sin City. And director's like, you're going to have to say Robert Rodriguez's. And he's like, no, it's going to be Frank Miller's Sin City. It's going to be literally lifted from the books. And in order to do that, he had to get rid of his union. So I don't know if he's part of the union anymore. He probably is because he had to do some other films. But for them to make this movie, he had to disassociate from the director's union.
Yeah. And then he took it one step further and he added special guest director Quentin Tarantino to the mix, which only further complicates things.
It does kind of complicate, but I think it's all green screen, and I think it's shot in his warehouse in his ranch, right?
Yeah, but if you watch the background of it, there was so much work that went into the filming of the non-green screen elements to make them fit inside the film. This is one of the single best, maybe the best, we took people and put them in front of a green screen movies ever. Because they feel fluidly placed in the background. Even though the background is a cartoon, it doesn't feel like they're standing out of it. They're merely.
No, like I would think of like 300.
Yeah,
which
300
is all
would later go on to do that same thing. Primarily, if you look at the scene where Goldie's sister is driving the car to shoot Marv, they shot her car actually on a pedestal, swiveling as she was like veering left and right. They could have just moved the camera, but instead they moved the car so that they could get her hair movement, they could get everything else around it as they were doing it. So what's so great is that this isn't just a movie where like we put people in front of green screen and move the camera around them. They actually really took the time to animate the physical presence as well.
Because when you say green screen, you're thinking, oh, you're so lazy, you didn't go on location and everything. But they actually put the care into it. And if you look like Bruce Willis coming down driving his car, you can see. I think they put it on a track.
Yep. Like
a track, so it is driving, but it's stationary.
Yeah.
So it is moving, and then you can have a lot of more special effects to that. I love the story how they got Bruce Willis involved because Robert Rodriguez shot a demo tape, and it's in the movie. It's Josh Hartnett's scene.
The first scene,
and so he went to Bruce Willis's place. He's like, I have a film that I think you'd be interested in doing. And I don't think they got 5 seconds in until Bruce Willis stopped. I don't care what you want me to do. I like the look. I want to be part of this.
Yeah.
So it was a quick sale.
It's great to see, too, that scene with Hartnett at the beginning is in the movie still. Like, that is the scene he filmed. And you can see Hartnett looks a little bit different in the first time we see him to the end tag of the film, because I think he brought him in to film that second part later. You can see that
kind of like the bookend the film, right?
Yeah. And it's a great utilization of it because it's from a short story collection, Booze, Broads, and Bullets, I believe.
It's an offshoot of this.
Yeah, it could never have been its own story, but it's just enough as like a flavor piece to add to the film. And people forget that there is a fourth story. It's just a very small story. The cast of this movie. We talk about great cast. This is an incredible cast. I mean, we have Elijah Wood just off of Lord of the Rings, and he's playing like I would say a secondary, maybe tertiary character in Kevin, and he's playing completely against type too, which is what I love. So many people in this movie are playing against type. You
Right.
know?
Everybody, all the protagonists look like they could bench press themselves out of a problem,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
you get Elijah Wood, who's just kind of like, yeah.
But then there's like Nick Stahl, who plays, the yellow bastard, if you will. Just fresh off of Terminator 3, where he played John frickin' Connor, like our lead character in that film, and then he's like, I'm going to play a yellow rapist and murderer. Like, everyone, I love the playing against type that's on display, but then you get certain like larger than life people, like a Mickey Rourke, who's like playing exactly the type. You know?
Or you get Robert Rutger Howard's in
Yeah.
this. I'm forgetting his name. The cowboy, the senator.
Oh, Powers Booth.
Powers
Yeah.
Booth is in this too. So it's
Very
a lot of
much
like
so.
you forget, and we watch this movie. You go, all right, they're in this movie too.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk a little bit like Frank Miller's art style. Now, it looks simple. Even if you look at the pages, it's very much like the movie.
Yeah.
It's very, but what he does is he does very complex drawing, but he blacks out a lot of the stuff he draws. So it's almost like the filming.
Oh,
It
yeah.
looks simple, but there's a lot more complexity to this.
Yeah.
And Frank Miller is like that with his drawing. He does a lot of things and draws all full features of things, and then he almost erases everything or blackens it out. And I think that's kind of the same process Robert Rodriguez does with films, where he put a lot of things and then just like take that away, and focus on that as well.
When you remove distractions, the
Remove
focus is
distractions,
on
yeah.
something else. It's very similar to how Schindler's List only has that one girl in red, and like when she shows up, it's a focus. It's like a jarring moment where your eyes almost have to adjust to the red because you haven't seen it for 3 hours. That's kind of the way here too. Is like that small color splash on focused objects really makes things like Nick Stahl's character really pops as the yellow guy because we've been in a black and white world for so long. And he
Yeah.
even does that in the book too. He actually colored in yellow, so it's like
Yep,
when
yep.
he started to infuse a little bit of color in too. It's almost just like, whoa, that thing stands out.
I know that, or that I can remember mentioning in the story. There's a woman that wears blue lingerie, and all of a sudden it's blue. It's like, whoa, I haven't
Yeah.
seen that for a while. Like that too. Or sometimes you peppers in blood in the Sin Cities, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
That's you got Bruce Willis, but the one story I really like is about Mickey Rourke's Marv.
Yeah.
I think everybody loves Marv's character.
Yeah, so that's The Hard Goodbye. That's our first story. I think it's not my favorite of the 3, but it's probably my second favorite of the whole collection, if I can say that. Because I think that it's the most accessible. It is a guy who falls in love, she dies,
And
I've
he
got
knows,
to hunt to kill
he's
her.
so grotesque. He knows better that a pretty girl likes him.
Yeah.
And he knows it. Like, why are you falling for me? Right.
Yeah, he knows there's something not right here, but he doesn't care because everything's working for him. But when she dies, then he has to know. He's got to figure out what the deal was. And it's almost maybe he's better off not knowing. But he has to find the killer, and he wants to, find the killer first and foremost, and then maybe try to avoid dying. But he's comfortable with dying as long as he's done one thing right.
Get it over. I don't have all day.
Yeah. It's a great character story, though, and it introduces you to a lot of elements, too. That's one thing that it does really well playing it first. It introduces you very quickly to Dwight, introduces you to Shelley, introduces you to the prostitutes, introduces, like, every single element that would later come into play in the rest of these stories, as well as even in the sequel film, is introduced with the story.
Yeah, but I remember an interview, and I can't remember who did the interview. It's one of those things of, just the record factory of just
Yeah.
interviewing for promoting the movie. And somebody asked him, well, how did you get involved with this role? And he goes, I read the script, and I felt like Marv my entire life, and I'm finally able to play myself.
Mm.
And that's what he said. I think he thinks he's more of Marv than he is of generally being Mickey Rourke.
Well, his is the case, too, where the prosthetics added to his
Yeah, the jaw,
performance
yeah.
don't take away at all. And
No.
that's a great feat to be able to act through prosthetics. It's both a win for the prosthetics and for the actor, because so often we've seen, a little bit less so now, but more in the past, prosthetics get added and they detract from the performance. Marv's performance in this film, Mickey Rourke's work, is so integral with that it feels kind of like, he's not Mickey Rourke. I don't see Mickey Rourke when I see that character. It's like when I see Colin Farrell as the Penguin in the new Batman movie. I don't see.
Yeah,
Colin
where are
Farrell.
you? Right, yeah.
The performance is so much a part of that, and I think having that really great prosthetics works, and those
It does.
bandages that are completely white on the film, it's beautiful.
So, right, and Frank's using all the elements in all these characters of exaggeration, but also the inspirations of film noir, the condemnation, the suffering, be careful of the girls you fall in love with.
Yeah.
Also the tricky, the side story of Johnny being a cop, and then
Yeah.
you don't really know that, and you go into alleys where you think you can get away with it, but then the girls take over. So there's everywhere you turn, there's always somebody that can kick your ass.
Yeah, this is very much a noir tale written through the lens of a guy who has done superheroes, because he gets that larger than life element of like I love that shot of Marv breaking through the door and just like people flying away from him.
Yeah,
You know,
they
it's
use
just
that in the
he's
movie
got
too,
that,
and in the book. It's really, yeah.
And I think that could only happen from a guy who's done Batman and noir stuff. Like a love for both, being able to mix them together, and that's what I think is so unique about this film. Is it's not saying what these guys are doing is okay inherently. He's
But
just
making
saying
it
that's who they
style.
are.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So that way you can have a character that is being misogynistic, and you're like, I don't like him, but that's exactly like he's realistic. He's there, you know, and that's what he's doing. Yeah, it's a great first story. I also really like. I think we kind of poo-poo on the second story a little bit, the big fat kill, but it's a really great building tension exercise. That whole second story with Dwight, because
It's slow burn.
it's a very slow burn.
Compared to
it's probably
Marv,
the most
yeah.
complex of the stories.
Yeah.
Because he's there, he's with Shelley, he's getting his good time going, and then like the film ratchets up the tension every single choice that is made, and it's him making bad calls, the prostitutes making bad, everyone makes horrible calls in that story.
That's another trope of noir. Is you want them to do right, and they're not going to do it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy, like the scene that Tarantino directed was the one with Jackie Boy and Dwight in the car, and Jackie Boy's kind of like, you know, breathing through his neck hole and telling him that he wants to smoke, and the cop pulling them over. Like, it's a very good display for Tarantino, who directed that portion for $1. The reason why is because Robert Rodriguez scored Kill Bill 2 for $1.
Ah.
So they had a little bit of a trade-off, and
So
Tarantino wanted to
they always
experiment
do that.
with this
Yeah.
because he does not like digital effects films, and so he wanted to experiment with this kind of a filmmaking, but didn't want to do a whole movie. So he got his chance. And that's, we can probably see he hasn't done it since. He probably wasn't a fan of it.
Because like I said, it looks like it could just be lazy filming, but it takes a lot of tedious work to get it to look like this.
Yes.
It does. It does take a lot of skill and a lot of tedious work to make it just shooting this in a warehouse without green screen. It takes a lot of work involved. So yeah, if we didn't know about it, it is like 3 stories melded into one, but they're connected by a bar. That's kind of, but the city,
Yeah.
it's actually, if you didn't know, it's Basin. But the lights are always, I think it's, if you read the stories in the comic book, somebody shoots it,
Scratched out, yeah,
or
shot
somebody
out.
shot it out the BA, so it looks like it say it's Sin City.
Yeah, just it's a clever wordplay, I think.
Yeah.
My favorite of the 3 is that Yellow Bastard with Bruce Willis and Nick Stahl and Jessica Alba, just because there's something wholly like memorable of the fact that this guy spent time in prison to protect her, and that he doesn't see her in that way, but she sees him in a romantic way because he was the white knight coming in to rescue her.
And he knows
there's
the
that
fault
kind
of
like
that,
Muddled, there's that muddled worldview of him, like, because he has to take this horrible fall, everyone thinks he's a rapist and a killer. And it's like, you know, like having that white knight who's willing to take those kinds of hits. Those are almost the worst kind of hits to take, especially if you're an innocent person, to be labeled in that way. And he does it to protect her. And I also just love the visual style. Again, I go back to it, but the yellow coloring on Nick Stahl's character, and just the gruesome way in which Bruce Willis dispatches.
Is he wearing like a
multiple
prop
times.
hat?
It's I would say whole headpiece.
Yeah.
Because his head bulged up and stuff. But that recurring piece of I took his weapons away, both of them, is such a gruesome piece. But it's
in the
also
book too,
something that
right.
I absolutely adore that he did in the movie. Is I'm just gonna shoot his junk off.
But I don't think we emphasized, if you didn't really know, everything is exactly how it is in the movie. In the comic books, word for word, scene for scene,
There
it's
isn't a
exactly.
specific screenplay even. I think when they refer to screenplay, they just read the book, and you can see in certain background stuff that their storyboards are just panels. Like they just cut the book apart and put the storyboards together. And that brings back to I was going to mention as well. If you purchase the Blu-ray of the film that I've got here, it does have 2 different cuts of the film. There's an extended version that features a few more bits and pieces that were in each of the stories. It clocks in like 25 minutes longer. This is a rarity. I don't think the extended edition is good compared to the original. It's fine. But the problem with it is that it separates all the stories into like 4 short films. But I think the way that the stories intermingle is more important to the narrative. It keeps the flow going, it keeps the style going, it keeps the score, there's no credits, like it's kind of a messier extended cut of the film where it just separates them all out into a bunch of short films, and I think the cohesiveness is what's really a strength
It
of
is,
this movie.
yeah.
How they bleed into each other.
Yeah, because
So-
you don't. It's very, like you said, very distinct stories, but they all kind of blend into the same kind of environment.
Yep.
And bleed into, like, they're all connected. Not so much like a tangle, like we said for this Gun for Hire, but
They're not,
loosely
they're not
thread.
dependent on each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of, like, there's a lot of, even though there's a lot of misogyny and kind of, girls are hot for it, but there's a lot of female empowerment in this movie. There's an alley where the girl, you don't go, even if how big of a bad guy you are, there's an area where you don't go where the girls are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a shot in there too. It's a heavily CG shot of like the cop car, like when he's describing it, pulling up and like the lights switch off and he turns around when he's entered Old Town because here he's not the cops anymore. He's not the one in charge. And it's a very, very iconic moment for me as a viewer because I hadn't seen anything like that. There's a lot of stuff in this movie I hadn't ever seen done before
Sure.
in that way.
Yeah.
And I was taken with that the entire time through. It's like the cops know they don't own this place, and that we don't often see that with prostitutes in a film getting the upper hand.
Real zero dollars. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But when I went to see this movie theater, I was like, if Clive Owen did not want to shave his head for this, because Dwight in the comic book, he's bald. So did Clive just like, no, I'm not going to do it, or
Yeah,
what? Yeah.
and that would later come to kind of pain them because Dwight in this story in the big fat kill is he just has a new face. He just went through surgery from the previous story of
Yeah.
Him to Kill For, which was adapted in the second film, and they didn't.
So he
get
has
Clive
plastic
Owen back. They
surgery
got
and he's
Josh
bald.
Brolin to play him.
Oh.
So the whole thing was like Josh Brolin had to end that part with getting facial reconstruction, and then he had to have the same Clive Owen hair, so he would match the character. And it kind of comes back to bite him because Josh Brolin doesn't look as good with that hair. But
Yeah.
it's a unique kind of a thing, and I think Clive Owen looks better with it. If that helps.
Right. It's just one of those things I noticed because I was a big fan of the comic books. It came out when I was in high school and college. But then he's like, "This is Dwight," and you're like, "Dwight's bald. What the hell?"
Yeah. Yeah. Fair.
Yeah. But also,
Um,
Dwight, you don't mess with Dwight. That's
No.
the other thing.
And
No.
I like that each film kind of like delves or each story delves enough into like a specific kind of violence. The first story is very much like a beat 'em up, a punch them kind of
Marv Way
violence.
bench
Yeah.
press him out of himself out of
He's
problem.
gonna tear you apart. Whereas like the second story has a bit more of a clean cutness to it because
Schemer.
it's all swords, cutting things up.
It's a little
like-
more clean, right?
Yeah, and like the blood is all white at that point, white against the black backdrop. And then you get the third film, which doesn't really deal so much with kind of like hands beating up, but like strangulation with like kind of there's like a specific kind of violence portrayed in each one of these stories.
It's almost like an entrapment that you're trying to get out of.
Mhm.
Like you talk about the Bruce Willis kind of.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
There's almost like this slow grip around your neck that he's dying.
Yeah, when he
Throughout
gets the noose around the neck, like there's so many like
Yeah.
cutting off of air. And yeah, you're right. It kind of comes back to him kind of making that ultimate sacrifice. So
And I don't think we give him enough credit. Frank Miller, for all his honesty, he's actually a pretty good story writer.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
I mean, even though it's this highly exaggerated, it's highly octane noir, but he's really good at writing. It's very clever. I mean, yeah, she makes less noise of leaves falling on trees,
Yeah.
something like that.
I think
Yeah.
what he gets kind of hit for is that his story, especially in Sin City, they're all archetypes. But that's kind of the point. This is a homage. This whole series has been an homage to the pulp novel stories that he grew up with.
Yeah.
So like you can have like these archetypes, but what I love about him is each time he accesses a story, he gives a little twist, just a tish of a twist that we didn't.
It's a
see
little,
before.
yeah, right.
He takes a narrative left turn, if you will. Like with Marv's story, it's the fact that Goldie has the twin sister is like an iconic twist in these kind
I
of
know, it's
stories.
almost like you see it coming.
Yeah, but then kind of like the teaming up with her to go and find the man who eats people and works for the church. In the second film, there's the whole Jackie Boy realization left turn that like it only works because of the shaky truce between the prostitutes and the cops. And then you get that third story of Bruce Willis, where the turn is that Bruce Willis has to take the fall for this horrible event.
So she
and
can.
he's deemed that way. He takes these hits to protect her the whole time, but it's the kind of hits he takes. So,
Yeah. So, have you seen Sin City?
Yeah. Have you seen the movie? Have you seen the sequel? There was a sequel called A Dame to Kill For.
Yeah, I
That
think
was a
Joseph
much more
Gordon-Levitt.
mixed film.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's in it,
it's got
yeah.
some original stories that I don't think are as good as the adaptations. It was also made in 3D, and I think the 3D in that movie actually looks pretty good, but it kind of creates a glossiness to the rest of it.
Right, it's black and white, but it's not aesthetic as this is.
Yeah, it's not as clean cut. I still like it, but it's not nearly as great. Like this, I think Sin City might be like a perfect movie in terms of like what it's trying to accomplish. I think it's
I agree.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
There's also there was a plan to do a third film, To Hell and Back, based on the largest of the stories at the end. That I don't think we're going to have, because the second movie didn't make much money, but there was the original idea of having a Johnny Depp and I think Angelina Jolie in that story, which I would have liked to have seen. It was a good story. But now it looks like Legendary is making a TV series. They're looking at making an animated series and a live-action series for streaming, which I'm interested in. I think you could do this for a lower budget and still be successful.
Animation's probably the next avenue for it. Yeah.
So have you seen the original film? Did you like the second one more? Maybe you're in that exclusive area. Or where should we cover in terms of Robert Rodriguez's directing caliber next? He's got a lot of different movies. He's done a ton of movies that are very, very different.
Desperado.
I would love to talk those three movies, the Mexico trilogy, because I've only seen the first two.
And Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
Yep. So let us know down in the comments what we should cover next.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you want to make sure that your voice is absolutely heard, go ahead and click the link for that Patreon, because you can sacrifice 1 cup of coffee every month, and then you will have access to our regular rotation, I guess, of people who pick the movies for us. There's so many movies out there. There's just 2 of us. I'm going to keep picking horror. He's going to keep picking
Noir.
Find something in the middle, maybe, and let us know what we should cover next.
Exactly.
And if you can't afford that, then please at least consider liking and subscribing to the video. There are 2 free things that you can do that help support the channel and help to make sure you never miss an episode. Because what, Nick, we got episodes Mondays, Thursdays
and Saturdays.
You don't want to miss that stuff. There's a lot of movies. If you fall behind, it's tough to get back up. So thank you guys for joining us, and you can find my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and our podcast you can find anywhere on the internet.